Bom dia a todos, é grande prazer estar aqui.
Good morning, it's a pleasure to be here. Mr. Ambassador of the Cameroon Republic, Martin Agbord, Dean of the African Heads of Mission Group in Brazil. I'd like to greet all the diplomats of African countries and other members of the diplomatic body in Brasilia, Professor João Bosco Monte, President of the Brazil-Africa Institute, all the business people, people from the academia, and all other interested in the relationship between Brazil and Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be present in the opening of Brazil-Africa Forum 2024. Organized every year, this is the 12th edition, done by Brazil-Africa Institute under the leadership of Professor João Bosco Monte. This is one of the main spaces for discussions among African and Brazilian leaders about contemporary topics. The central theme of this edition are the incentives and infrastructure investments to boost sustainable development in Brazil and in Africa. And it's great to see the presence of representatives from governments, business people, and different leaders in different countries and sectors. I'd like to analyze several aspects of the relations between Brazil and Africa in terms of investments in infrastructure and sustainable development, checking several initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, since the beginning of the current government of President Lula, engagement with Africa has been a priority to Brazil. In 2023, President Lula visited Angola, South Africa, Cape Verde, and Saint Tomé and Príncipe. This year, he visited Egypt and Ethiopia, and he has spoken in the opening of the 37th Summit in Africa, which is something exceptional, showing the special relationship of Brazil and Africa. In addition to the visits to Africa, President Lula was gathered with 11 of their African peers, and I myself could be gathered with 20 of my peers in the continent. So this agenda reflects the density of the relations between Brazil and Africa that can be even more dynamic. We also had the honor of hosting last year the conference of the African diaspora in the Americas. More than 50 delegations of African countries and from the Americas and other international organizations took part in that meeting. Different voices were translated into a letter of recommendation that will be an input to the discussions of the 9th Pan-African country that will take place in Togo next year. And I want to mention the participation and collaboration of IBRAF at this conference on the African diaspora in the Americas. I am pretty sure that the 21st century will be Africa's century, considering the enormous economic potential of the continent. African continent started in 2021, the biggest area of common trade, 54 countries, and in terms of population with a market of 1,300,000,000 people and a GDP combined of $3,005,000,000. The forecast is that in 2050, the African population will increase from 1.3 billion people to almost twice as much, almost 2.5 billion people. In contrast with other areas in the world, such as China, Europe, and the US, that will face the challenge of an aging population, which is a global trend with economic impact in those regions. In addition to that, the continent has more than 60% of the arable lands that are not used in the world. It's rich in natural resources, including raw material that is necessary for new technologies, new green technologies such as critical minerals, and has a young population of around 20 years of age on average that is growing. Africa is increasingly more related to innovation, production of knowledge, economic growth, and social dynamism. Paying attention to those potentials, the greatest economies in the world have increasingly came closer to Africa, announcing great investments. And this not only reflects the importance of the continent, but in addition to that, it shows the eminent multiplication of opportunities of business with Africa for Brazilian companies that will, if they will get into those new production chains. Although Brazil is very present in Africa, it's not in its full potential. We have with the countries of the continent something that is important to the success of any long-term partnership. The trust, mutual trust, fruit of Asian relations of our peoples. Brazil has the biggest population of Afro-descendants in Brazil outside Africa. For us, African matters are not seen by far or from the outside, but from the inside, because that's part of what we are. The African blood is in our veins. African accents are part of our language. The African culture enriches our ideas, and we are on the other side of the ocean, but dreams and aspirations of our peoples are connected. And this connection, added to the solidity of the Brazilian economy and the power of African continent, will bring prosperity for both sides of the Atlantic. By the way, there's a metaphor from the diplomat Alberto da Costa e Silva, saying that the Atlantic is not an ocean that divides us, but a river that unites our peoples and our destinations. Brazil has today a unique potential in the planet. It is in a peaceful area, having a great insertion in international markets. We have unique aspects in terms of the use of renewable energy. It has the possibility of feeding the world in a sustainable way, producing inputs necessary to the transitions that the world economy has to go through. And we are also trying to do this in a sustainable way in order to do the energy transition. We don't want to re-industrialize the country, but to make a new industry. The new program of acceleration of growth called PAC, that will invest more than 1.6 trillion reals in the coming years, is opening opportunities for private investments in Brazil and abroad, in projects that will structure the Brazilian economy in the middle of this new industrialization of the Brazilian industry. And in this structure, we have many opportunities of cooperation with Africa. Our goal is to be part of this journey of prosperity in Africa. We want to establish with Africa partnership in terms of economy, social, and environmental ways. We want to be part of trade, entrepreneurship, and fostering startups, agro-industry, and sustainable industry, focus on food security, sciences, technology, innovation, green transition, among many other areas. Our vision is that a new economy focus on people that promote the jobs for young people. So therefore, our business people and investors need to build new partnerships in such a way to create a flow of investments in South Atlantic that will benefit both sides. Last year, the commercial trade between Brazil and Africa was of around $20.4 billion. There are many room for growth. Airlines and ocean lines have to be broadened to make the commerce to grow. In addition to Ethiopian Airlines and TAG from Angola. In 2023, LATAM and South African Airways have new flights between Brazil and Africa, and Emirates will connect Sao Paulo and Casablanca next December. And we hope that new airways will be open, connecting different African cities and Brazilian cities in the future. And there's a recent agreement of air transport celebrated with Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, the demographic growth and implementation of the free trade in Africa will create needs of infrastructure. A great population that is concentrated in cities will need more and more to have urban and inter-urban mobility connection, infrastructure, logistics, and cargo infrastructure. Current investments in infrastructure in the continent is of over $100 billion. But the estimations is that there is a deficit in terms of financing every year of $130 to $170 billion. In order that Brazil can take part in creating infrastructure that is necessary to the development of African countries, we need to recreate mechanisms that have been suppressed in recent years to amplify the presence of Brazilian companies in the continent. To give you an example, Brazil has added the Portuguese connection with BAD. It's a mechanism that aims at strengthening in African entrepreneurs and small companies in the continent.
We have also gone back to contributing with $10 billion to the African Development Bank in its last capital round. There are still opportunities for cooperation between financial institutions in sub-areas like AGAF and in the Financial Fund for Development in Plata also, and with their African counterparts. Reflecting on the central theme of this 12th edition of the Forum, I can't be remiss to mention the forum we had in 2023 when President Lula highlighted the need for the countries in our region to take up their efforts again to strengthen their infrastructure. The state of foreign affairs and of budgets and financing has followed this mandate with the regional agenda of strengthening up our infrastructure, and we have considered the 5 pillars of the inter-American development. So we have these axes and these lines that go from north to south. We have different modals of transportation. We plan to build airports and bridges and fiber optic connections and electrical connections as well. On the Brazilian side, we are dealing with a portfolio of almost 200 projects that will help to bring about the integration with our neighboring countries and the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. These projects will strengthen the connectivity between Brazil and the African continent, especially the continental side, that will have a significant impact on the flow of goods and services. Countries such as Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda have shown expressive economic growth and have become very attractive destinations for Brazilian businesses. Many local development banks that we have mentioned as CAF and the BID and Plata, besides BNDES here in Brazil, also help with these efforts and are able to contribute more than $10 billion in loans for projects for infrastructure and integration projects in the next few years. We hope to encourage Brazilian businesses to invest in Africa and also to attract African business people to enter Brazilian economy. The latest data from our central bank shows that the investment of African businesses in Brazil has more than tripled, going from 2.3 billion in 2021 to 7 billion in 2022. Some examples of these African investments in our country include the expansion of the Terminal Number 3 at the Guarulhos International Airport with South African Airways, also fertilizers with a business from Morocco. The investment of Brazil in Africa has gone from 2.1 billion, and Angola has been where most of this capital has been invested. We have also seen many businesses, Brazilian businesses like WEG, which has been present in Africa. They recently opened a plant in Argelia. Embraer is also investing in Africa with a plant in Johannesburg. Positivo, which is an educational system and a technology producer, they inaugurated a new local headquarters in Maputo. In 2024, Petrobras acquired participation in 3 blocks of gas and oil exploration in São Tomé and Príncipe, and this operation is a new start to the investment of the state company in Africa, which shows and shores up President Lula's initiatives to be present in the African continent. Apex Brazil has 14 projects currently focused on 7 African countries. There is a map of opportunities, and this is a tool that is free on the Apex website, and they identified many opportunities for Brazilian exports to the African countries. And this involves various segments such as food, steel, iron, and the objective is to diversify the inflow and the outflow of these goods and services. And to this end, the head of foreign affairs has sent trade missions to Kenya, Ethiopia, and other countries. Recently, we have been in Namibia and Botswana, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Thanks to the management of the Foreign Affairs Ministry and other agencies, new African markets were opened to Brazilian products. I'd like to mention Egypt with cotton, beans, meat, and dairy products. Argelia also the export of live cattle, also the genetic material. Zambia with live cattle and genetic bovine material. And so the economic and business cooperation, which is the 4th pillar of the Portuguese-speaking languages, CLP, also opens up new perspectives for Brazil to participate in with great interest. Ladies and gentlemen, between 2024 and 2026, Brazil is planning a series of great importance for a developing country and for African countries particularly, such as G20, which happened in 2024, the BRICS meeting, and the COP30, as well as the meeting of the ZUPACs, the Peaceful Zone meeting for the South region of the globe. So we have this zone of cooperation which was established in 1986 with the goal of promoting regional integration and the maintenance of peace in the countries in the South Atlantic area, in the South American continent and African continent as well. This is important for the maintenance of maritime safety. For example, the people of Guinea and the experience there show the importance of maintaining this peace and how strategic this is. Brazil, in its presidency of the G20, is focusing on the African continent, and aims to make this cooperation better and bigger, and it should be approved soon, which will bring many positive effects for the African countries. We have Angola, Egypt, and Nigeria have participated in many meetings that we have held this year. During the presidency of Brazil in the G20, we have had the adoption of Egypt into the BRICS. We also have the African Union, and we have highlighted the problems with the debts. And what we have seen is the exportation of poorer countries to richer countries. And as our president said, the Marshall president, but the opposite. There is no way to invest in education and health and climate change if part of the budget is not invested in development. Another issue is the taxation of the super rich. If the richer countries paid 2% over their profits, we would be able to generate enough capital to feed the people who, according to the UN's Food Security Committee are going hungry in Africa. This also makes sense from an economic standpoint. Taxing the super rich will redistribute resources in a more efficient way around the world. Most of these super rich are in favor of this measure, according to opinion survey that has been done recently. Also, with Brazil in the presidency of the G20, we have been able to gain the support of many African countries because they also see the opportunities to eradicate hunger and many other problems in our countries and have sustainable development. Imagine the huge potential that has been kept back that will be freed in Africa and other countries in the global south if we are able to eradicate hunger and poverty in the next few years. Imagine how our populations will be able to grow and thrive when they don't have to worry about what they're going to eat the next day, but they can channel all their energies, their talents, and creativity to the solution of the great current problems such as climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also speak about the cooperation instruments that we have in Brazil that cover fundamental areas like culture, education, scientific, and industrial development. These instruments are the Brazilian ADC Commission for Development, Guimarães Rosa Institute, the Brazilian Agency for the Promotion of Exports and Development, APEX, Embrapa, which is the agricultural agency, and many other institutions. I would also like to point out that ABC and Guimarães Rosa Institute are part of the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Brazil. Our technical cooperation goes back over 3 decades, and we have a solid commitment to cooperate with other countries. 1/3 of almost all of these projects that have been carried out by Brazil are happening in the African continent, and with special attention to the Portuguese-speaking countries. Mozambique is one of the countries that has received the most investment. This covers various industries such as health, agriculture, education, professional training, among other infrastructure projects. But Brazil's technical moderation can and should be a two-way relationship. We have medicine, tropical medicine studies that has been neglected, and we have a lot to learn from our African partners. We also see great synergy in the educational area, the participation of African students in these academic mobility programs, especially the PEC program has strengthened our historic ties between our continents. The integration of Brazilian teachers and professors with many African students who have come to our universities in the last decades have helped to foster this communication, which can help to build a more global society. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is particularly engaged in working with the Education Ministry to modernize and expand these programs and opportunities for educational cooperation. We continue to look for a partnership to expand the possibility of scholarships and financing for potential participants in these programs who do not have the financial resources to come and study in Brazil. As a result, in 2024, we had a record number of candidates from the African continent for graduate programs in Brazil. This demand also corresponds to the record number of openings for African continent students to come. Over 104 universities have openings for African students in this program. And I would like to mention Brazil Africa Institute that they have been a facilitator in this partnership between Brazil and the African continent, offering various programs for technical development and training of young professionals from the African continent. One of them is the technical program for training of young people in English. It's Youth Technical Training Program, YTTP, which uses a methodology and materials that are focused on the professional development, that focus on the transfer of knowledge and skills and technologies in which Brazil is a world reference. In this year's edition, the YTTP is set to receive 1,000 young people from African countries to be trained in Brazil in areas such as agriculture, health, education, IT, sports, and business entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we have an intense and very busy agenda with great potential. President Lula, in his third mandate, show balanced foreign policy, and we look to the universality of foreign and internal policies. Africa is a theme that is directly or indirectly involved in all of the areas of Brazilian government. As President Lula pointed out in his opening speech and the African Union meeting this year, there is no global south without Africa in it. And so, as he said, returning to this proximity between Brazil and the African continent will help to strengthen our historic ties and to bring about a more just and fair global order. And for this mission, which we believe is essential and very important, we count on all of you. Thank you very much for your presence, and I wish you all a good event. Thank you very much, Minister, for your words and for your exposition of the current scenario. I'm going to invite Professor João Bosco to come and comment on what the Minister just talked about, and this is much of what we are going to be discussing here today with the members of the different panels. I know, Professor, that we have some words. You have some words to the Minister. Let me take this microphone over here to them. Well, this wasn't in the program, but the message here is represents the effort. Minister, your observations is very important for us because it gives us the assurance that the government, all the governments of our brother countries, and also civil society correspond the expectations that we have. And so knowing that yourself and your colleagues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are engaged and working hard so that Brazil can be a player in this cooperation, this development. And so it's very heartening to hear your words. Thank you very much.